first screening of The Overnighters, and you're very lucky. I saw this film at True False Film Festival earlier this year, and it's really something special. It's really an incredible film. That is director Jesse Moss, who I want to welcome to the stage.
Sorry, just giving credit where credit's due.
There will be a Q&A after the screening, so please stick around. I think it will be very interesting. Of course, also shut off your cell phones, your tablets, your pagers, fax machines, anything that make noise. And I'll see you after the screening.
No, just to thank you guys for coming out. I'm Jesse Moss. I'm the director of The Overnighters. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to talking to you guys after the show, so hopefully you'll stick around. Thank you, and thanks DOC NYC. It's great to be here in this beautiful theater.
I'm going to open this up to questions in a second. I wanted to start off with the pastor is such a compelling and complicated main character who seems to have so many battles with the press and the city and neighbors and his own people he's helped, as well as the elders in the church, even with himself. When you set out to make this film, did you know he was going to be the subject, or how did you find him?
No, I had no idea. I mean, I was interested in what was happening in North Dakota, and this was the place in America where people were flocking to find work, and I was interested in Williston, this frontier boom town in America, and I was curious what that looked like and felt like, and I also felt like, you know, there's a big conversation about the energy boom in America, but it's really about fracking, which is important, but there's not a conversation really about the human beings or the labor side of the equation. And I mean, the film that really inspired me to make documentary, Harlan County, USA. I don't know if people here have seen it. It's an extraordinary film and made in the 1970s. And I felt like a film, not to compare my film to that film, but I wanted to really look at the people who were working in this industry, and were these people finding what they were seeking in North Dakota. But what happened is, I was reading the Williston Herald online, and Pastor Jay used to write a clergy column for the paper, and he had written a column that I read in which he called on Williston to welcome these newcomers. And this was after Sherry Arnold, the woman in the film, had been murdered, was mentioned in the film. So I knew that this was unusual, and I called Jay, and we spoke on the phone, and that's when he told me there were men and women sleeping in his church. And I didn't think that would be a film, but I thought I'll come and visit. And I came to Williston. I came by myself. That's how I made the film up there. And I actually went right to the church. And I tell you, I mean, that room where these men slept was about this big. And the moment I walked in, it was extraordinary and just powerful. And Jay was there, and there were these men there, and they were like weeping. You know, they'd gotten off the bus like an hour ago with like $20. And I just, Jay, he welcomed me like an overnighter, and I stayed in the church for 6 months, the first 6 months of shooting the film, and he welcomed me, and he just let me start filming, and I still didn't think there's no way I'm going to make a movie about a church and a pastor. What does it have to do with the oil boom? But it sort of took hold of me, and I, you know, Jay's struggles, his drama, his complexity was there. You know, I could see that, and I just started.
In addition to Jay, so many of the characters that we get, it seems at the beginning we just get a little bit of insight. You actually have these major evolutions.
Yeah.
How long did you film for?
I shot the film for 18 months, and a lot happened in those 18 months. I mean, that was a very turbulent time in the lives of these men, and there was actually there was only one other man in the church, an overnighter, who's not in the film, and that's because one day I showed up and he had left, and there was, I mean, which is interesting, but it was not, it was hard to deal with in the film, and there was actually a whole other location and a whole other set of characters who, for the longest time, I filmed because I really couldn't fully embrace that the film was going to be about this program, and it really took about a year into the life of the Overnighters program to let go of those. Really, what I was hedging my bets, and I did an awful lot of work with these other people, but the men, you know, and I didn't. So outside of the one man named Clement, who was a Jamaican guy from Michigan, who I loved. He was very charismatic and kind of very funny, and it's not a film with a lot of humor, so I like that. But these were the guys I filmed. There were no other guys, and they weren't chosen for any scientific reason. They were chosen because I liked them, or because Keegan was so handsome, you know, and I thought, this guy's going to succeed. He's this big, strong kid from Wisconsin. He'll be the guy who makes it. And you know, Alan, you know, was the pastor's right-hand man. So, yeah.
A little bit of luck then. My last question before I open it up. Watching this for what is my second time now, I was struck the revelation at the end that Jay had been dealing with his sexual orientation in some way. Watching the film back, it made scenes change for me a little bit, and I wonder at what point in the filmmaking process were you privy to that? Did you find that out?
You know, I experienced it the way you experience it, which is chronologically. It happened where it happens. I arrived to film the program closing in mid-September of last year, and that weekend, that Friday, I got in. I think the program closed on Saturday. That Friday, Jay said, "I'm going to lose my job," and he told me why, and so it was really, the events were concurrent, and yet I was both stunned, and yet, you know, I always knew, you know, for Jay, this was so profoundly an expression of his faith as a Christian, the Christian ethic to love his neighbor, but it was clear both from what Jay said to me and what he didn't say to me, that this was coming from a human place in his heart, and that his compassion for these men and these women who were broken, who were burdened, who had stigma, his willingness to fight to include them in the community, was not just his faith, but it was, you know, himself. He saw something of himself in them, and that was the kind of mystery of Jay. For all his open bookness, you know, there were things that he didn't share with me, and there was a lot that we didn't talk about, actually, but, and I think we respected a kind of no-fly zone, and so I didn't push into some areas of his life, but so but I considered possibilities, you know, and so when Jay told me this, you know, I could kind of look back at all of the scenes in the film that we cut up in almost the whole film, and suddenly it had new meaning, and his journey had new meaning. You know, and the whole purpose of the program had new meaning for me, and that's why I felt like it had a place in the film, and what, you know, we spent a lot of time, he and I and his family, talking about before we could make the decision to include it.
Yeah, for me as well, it changed. It didn't feel extra. It felt fun.
It's abrupt, but it's also life. You know, it's you know, I in a way, if I was writing the screenplay, I might have written it differently, but it's what happened. Well, you know, in a way, the film is actually, for as different as it is from what I imagined, it's actually pretty true to the original intention, which was to represent this kind of lived reality for people on the ground in Williston, and how hard it is to survive, how hard it is to leave your burdens behind you and to start a new life, which is the romance and the mythology of the boomtown. You know, these men bring their burdens with them, and Jay, you know, himself brings them. Even though he's not running to a boomtown. I think that, you know, I mean, what it points to is, I think, a real, Williston doesn't want for money. I mean, it's a very wealthy community now, and the state of North Dakota has made a fortune in royalties on the drilling that's happening. But they have other priorities, and I think, you know, Williston has major infrastructure problems. But I think it's really, that's to kind of absolve them of moral responsibility, and I think, or it's a question of priorities, but priorities sounds very kind of programmatic, bureaucratic. It's really, you know, Jay went to every church in Williston, and there are a lot of them, and he went to his neighbors, and he went to the car dealership, and he asked them all to open their homes, or their garages, or their churches, and none of them would. And you can, I mean, Jay is a complicated person, and he did this, you know, altruism is always complicated, and I don't think anybody does good for, you know, purely unselfish reasons. It's not to say they're purely selfish reasons, but it's complicated. But I think Jay, Jay did something that most of us, I certainly would never do, and I think that it points to a real lack of a kind of lack of moral leadership in Williston. But that's not the only community that has confronted this kind of problem with this approach. I mean, my hometown of Palo Alto, you would think would be an enlightened, progressive community, is really intolerant. There are people who work, who sleep in their cars, and the city's been trying to kick them out. So it's not just Williston. I think it's also a faith in a ruthless faith in the market. They believe the housing market, which prices people out of living, affordable housing, will correct. Well, it's true, it will correct in 2 or 3 years, but until then, you're on your own. That's just how a lot of people feel.